The Interstellar Academy had always been a beacon of unity, where beings from the furthest edges of the galaxy came to learn, exchange knowledge, and build peace. But nothing had prepared the other students for what happened when the Deathworlders, those legendary humans from the dangerous blue planet Earth, decided to bring their so-called pets for intergalactic biology's open demonstration. The room was buzzing with the low hum of translators and flickers of bioluminescent communication, as students from the icy moons of Carvex, the sentient fungi of Mycor, and even the crystalline Araxians took their seats, waiting to observe Earth's unique domesticated species, expecting something delicate, perhaps elegant or vibrationally attuned like their own companions, until the doors hissed open, and in marched the humans with creatures that made half the class freeze mid-sentence. The first was a massive, dark-furred canine with jaws that looked engineered for war, its eyes alert and scanning, tail wagging in sharp whip-like motions. Behind it, a creature that looked like a panther but with scales rippling under its fur and an unsettling purr that vibrated the floor. Then came a feathered reptilian hybrid with a beak that could crush steel and a stare that locked onto prey, with surgical precision. The room fell deathly silent as one of the smaller aliens, a gelatinous being known as Trilka, fainted into a bowl of nutrient slime, while a pair of avian scholars flapped toward the ceiling panels in sheer terror. Professor Mirex, the four-eyed aquatic instructor, struggled to maintain composure as the lead human. A cheerful redhead named Cassie smiled and announced, "These are just our pets. Meet Bear, Shadow, and Pecky," as if she were introducing harmless toys rather than apex predators from a death world. The canine Bear gave a bark that shook the room's atmosphere filters, and Pecky let out a sharp squawk that caused the sensitive antennae of 3 students to recoil violently, while Shadow curled lazily around Cassie's leg, its eyes glowing, amber and unsettling the bioluminescent creatures who instinctively dimmed their bodies in submission. One brave alien, June from the marsh world of Zeltar, raised a tentacle and asked with a tremble in his voice, "These are domesticated?" To which Cassie simply nodded and explained how humans had raised these creatures for companionship, protection, and, in some cases, emotional support, triggering an immediate outcry from half the class who demanded security, verification, and genetic scanning, fearing that the presence of such volatile organisms could destabilize the classroom's safety protocols. The humans seemed perplexed by the reaction, with another student, Marco, holding up a treat and demonstrating how Pecky could balance on one claw while mimicking human speech, which made the crystalline Araxians buzz in horror, believing the creature had absorbed intelligence. Cassie, however, remained undeterred, continuing to explain how these beings, though powerful and sometimes fearsome, were symbols of trust, loyalty, and the bond Earthlings shared with nature, a concept so alien to the other species that many sat in stunned disbelief, processing the idea that humans voluntarily lived with, cared for, and even cuddled with creatures that could, in theory, decimate small villages. When Shadow began purring again and rolled onto its back, inviting belly rubs from anyone brave enough, the entire back row of aquatic beings slid nervously behind their tanks, while the methane-based floaters blinked in synchronized alarm, recording everything for their homeworlds. Despite the chaos, one small reptilian alien named Vree approached Bear with a translator bot in tow and asked if he could touch its fur. Cassie smiled and nodded, and as Vree extended his claw, Bear gently licked, it releasing a flood of warmth and an almost transcendent sense of awe. Suddenly, the horror shifted into curiosity. Maybe, just maybe, there was something profound in the way Deathworlders coexisted with such beasts, something the galaxy hadn't yet understood. The lesson was no longer about biology, but about the strange, terrifying beauty of Earth's balance, where danger met trust and even monsters could be loved. The following week, the Academy had not stopped talking about the human pet incident, and although some alien students still kept a wide berth whenever a Deathworlder entered a room, curiosity had begun to outweigh fear. Security bots had triple-checked every creature's neural patterns and toxin indexes, and to the astonishment of many species, all 3 animals passed as non-aggressive and even emotionally attuned, something unheard of in galactic fauna.
Yet not everyone was convinced, especially the cautious Cathari, whose homeworld was devoid of predators, and who believed any creature with teeth was inherently violent. The Academy, sensing an opportunity for deeper interspecies understanding,
organized a second session, this time a fully controlled environment holographically recorded and overseen by the Diplomatic Council. Cassie and Marco were invited again, with the same trio of pets now fitted with calming emitters and emotion-monitoring collars. The classroom was rearranged, barrier fields between students, neural relaxant mist for the more anxious species, and soft lighting to prevent sensory overload. When the humans entered this time, there were no screams or fainting, but a dense silence, thick with anticipation and latent tension. Bear walked calmly beside Cassie, tail lowered in a non-threatening sway, while Shadow slinked behind Marco. With calculated grace, and Pecky flew in slow, gliding loops above the group, periodically making whistling noises that translated awkwardly as, "Hello, snacks." Professor Mirix began the session by inviting the humans to explain how such creatures had come to live alongside them, not as tools or food sources, but as family. Cassie shared stories of hiking with Bear in snow-covered woods, of nights spent curled up with Shadow on stormy evenings, of how Pecky had once squawked so loudly during a home invasion that the intruder ran off terrified. Marco explained the evolutionary bond between humans and dogs, how both had hunted together thousands of years ago and learned to understand each other's emotions. At first, many aliens seemed unmoved, seeing these tales as strange romanticism. But then the practical demonstrations began. Bear responded to emotional cues, laying his head gently in the lap of a nervous Vortex student whose pheromones registered fear, causing the alien to freeze. But after a long moment, the student's bio-readings showed a drop in stress levels. Shadow, with a gesture from Marco, silently padded into the shadows and returned with a small trinket that one student had dropped earlier, showing memory and spatial intelligence far beyond expectations. And Pecky began mimicking sounds it had heard in the previous session, perfectly reproducing the exact phrase Vree had spoken with his voice, which caused Vree to leap in joy and declare Pecky a soul speaker. The class shifted again. This time, murmurs of admiration rose. Some began comparing their own species' companions, the algae symbionts of Merez, the singing clouds of Thrak, but none had creatures that were, by nature, so deadly and yet so deeply bonded. It was this paradox that fascinated the Galactic scholars. One Araxian linguist finally asked, "Why keep something that could kill you?" And Cassie's reply was quiet but powerful. "Because trust is only real when it's not guaranteed." That struck a chord. In a galaxy governed by treaties, contracts, and logic, the human idea of love and loyalty between species, with no obligation, was almost spiritual. After the class, a few brave students asked to approach the animals. Bear allowed his ears to be scratched. Shadow curled around Vree's legs. Pecky tried to land on a methane floater, failed, and crashed into a console, squawking indignantly. Laughter erupted, breaking the tension entirely. What had once been a terrifying showcase had become a bridge, an imperfect, strange, and incredibly human one. Yet even in this newfound understanding, something darker stirred beneath. One of the council observers, a cold-blooded strategist from the Sarathi Empire, took detailed notes, not of the pet's behavior, but of the human capacity to tame death, to turn predators into playthings, to live alongside chaos and call it home. She wondered, if Deathworlders could raise beasts like these with love, what else could they raise if threatened? What other monsters could they nurture, not for companionship, but for war? But for now, that question stayed unspoken. The class ended with handshakes, tail wags, and a few curious aliens asking where they might adopt smaller, less toothy Earth pets. Cassie grinned and promised to send holo-guides. Pecky whistled something that translated awkwardly as, "Give me grapes or regret," and everyone laughed. But as the students filed out, glancing back at the humans and their fearsome friends, a quiet respect had taken root. For the first time, the galaxy was not just in awe of the Deathworlders' resilience, but of their hearts. And in the shadows of that admiration, both wonder and warning began to grow.